What's up, YouTube? Hope everyone's having a great night so far. My name is Juju, and welcome to the channel. So today, we have a little deck profile. If you've been following my market watches, I've been talking about a deck archetype that hasn't really come out yet, and that archetype is Miracle Magic. The reason why it's named Miracle Magic is because there's an archetype very similar to this in Hearthstone called Miracle Rogue. And this deck essentially does what that deck did in Hearthstone. The deck is really fun. Honestly, the premise of the deck is you want to get out a threat on board, and that threat is either going to be your Runic Runic Familiar, your Vortimer, your Oni Spell Sword, or Monolith of Storms. Now, what do these threats have in common? Well, they get buffed every time you play a spell. And basically all of the cards, the rest of the cards are either going to be cheap spells that allow you to draw cards, such as Levitate, Lost in the Depths, Ancient Texts, Dimension Door, or cheap removal spells like Form of Power or Ancient Texts, cheap minions such as Shadow Scryer, Assistant Alchemist to help you discount cards, Street Conjurer to help you buff your removal options because you don't really run that many, and then cards that help you draw more cards, so like Palace's Wand, Vortimer the Volatile, Demetrios Playwright, and so on and so forth. This deck also includes Archimea Arithmancer because sometimes you'll just have it on board, and if your opponent lets it stay on board, you're just going to end up with a really big turn, and you're going to draw through your deck, which is really nice. Or if you leave up a Monolith of Storms, you just deal like so much damage. You can deal like upwards to like 10, 15 points of damage, sometimes 20 if you get really crazy with your draws. But yeah, essentially that's the theme of the deck. You basically want to get down one of your threats and then just play a ton of spells in one turn and grow your threats to become so big that your opponent can't deal with them. Very fun deck. And as you can see here, I've been playing 22 matches, 72% win rate. A couple of those matches were a learning curve, so I needed to learn the deck first. But I'm in Mythic right now, and I'm actually in the top 140. And that's pretty good considering that I just started playing today. Yeah. That's crazy. But yeah, anyways, the deck is really good. How you want to start off. So Mulligan. Let's talk about the Mulligan. The Mulligan for the deck, you want to Mulligan for your minions. So typically creatures, Shadow Scryer, Assistant Alchemist, Street Conjurer, Runic Familiar, sometimes Palace's Wand, sometimes Vortimer, sometimes Demetrios, sometimes Oni as well. In certain matchups, Monolith of Storms is also a pretty good card to include, although it's not really needed in some matchups, but yeah. Basically, you want your cheap minions to sustain you. It plays a lot like Tempo Magic at first. You basically want to discount all of your cheap minions so that you go wide on board. You can control board for the first couple of turns, and that'll allow you to set up your Runic Familiar, or your Oni Spell Sword, or your Vortimer, or any of that. From there, once you get your Runic Familiar safely on board, or your Oni, or your Monolith of Storms, you're off to the races. And essentially, the rest of the deck is going to be cheap magic spells, with the exception of Vow of Learning, which is still kind of cheap for 3 mana. But yeah, for the most part, that's pretty much it. You run about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 6-mana or 12 1-mana spells, and then you run Form of Wisdom, which will help you discount your other spells. Yeah, the deck is pretty fun. It draws a lot, and it does a lot of damage really fast. Against aggro, so matchup info, against aggro, you're basically going to be fighting for board. If you go first, you'll have a pretty good chance of winning as long as you get like Shadow Scryer, Assistant Alchemist, and some form of removal, or even Street Conjurer or Runic Familiar. Going second is also, you also have a good chance of winning, but you might want to get like a removal option just to make sure you can sustain your board, or have it clear so that you can play your minions. Against control, this deck really shines because if you can get off to a really fast start and your opponent spends their removal on your early game minions, you'll have a clear path to play the Runic Familiar, the Oni Spell Sword, or the Monolith of Storms. Not to mention Oni Spell Sword gives everything ward, so typically you can play a Runic Familiar turn 2, play Oni Spell Sword, and then possibly like play another spell with your bag of tricks, and you can get both a Runic Familiar and a Oni Spell Sword with ward, and that would be pretty much GG. Yeah. It essentially plays like Tempo Magic, but there are different win conditions, right? Tempo Magic wants to like burn you to death, but Miracle Magic wants to hit you in the face with a really big minion, whether that be Runic Familial, Fortimer, or Oni. And then it's a really good deck. I'm gonna go over individual card choices now. So let's start off with the draw package, right? So we're going to talk about Levitate. Levitate's going to be your 1 mana draw card. All of the spells are either draw a card or do damage. So this is really nice because it removes frontline and backline from your targets, from your from your opponent's creatures, right? So I'll typically use this on a Grand Hall, a Pyramid Warden, the Taunt with 2/3. You can even use it on the Hollow to bring it out if you need to kill it. There are a lot of really viable uses for it, and like you can even use it on a Guild Enforcer, for example, and it'll give you a clear path for your Runic Familial to hit face, or Oni Spell Sword, or any of those two. So yeah, it's a good card, and it draws you a card, and it's 1 mana, so it procs like pretty much every spell out here, right? Your Familial, your Palace Wand, your Vortimer. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And when used in conjunction with Archimea, it's a free draw, essentially, right? Because Archimea, when after you cast a spell that costs 3 or less, you refresh 1 mana. This card costs 1 mana, so you just play it, and you get 1 mana back, and then hopefully you draw into another draw spell. Lost in the Depths, target a creature, obliterate cards in your deck with the same cost as that creature, and draw a card. This card helps you thin your deck. Typically, you would want to use this on your 2-cost minions, so Vortimer or Demetrios or Runic Familial, but you can also use it on your Oni Spell Sword, or even your Shadow. Don't use it on your 1-cost cards. That's a no-no. Unless you're trying to dig for maybe like a Monolith of Storms to finish off, maybe that's okay. But for the most part, you're going to be using it on your 2, 3, or 5-cost minions. And be careful about when you play this too. Make sure you have enough threats to ensure that you won't run out of threats if your opponent ends up being able to deal with your big Runic Familiar. So make sure that you have maybe like 1 or 2 threats on standby just in case, right? A great card overall. It draws you a card. Same thing as Levitate. It's procs so many cards in the deck. Ancient Text. This card is really versatile. It's 2 damage, so it gives you either extra burst damage for reach. You could use it on a minion to kill. Has some synergy with Street Conjurer. You can give it protected to your Runic Familiar or your Oni Spell Sword to ensure that it stays alive for the next turn. You can also give it to your Monolith of Storms. It's a very versatile card. Must include 2 of, but yeah, very good in my opinion. Shadow Scryer. This card is one of the cards you want to open with for sure. Protected Ward is a great combination. It makes it so durable and makes it last longer than most of the time, 2 turns. But the best part is you get to foresee 1 at the start of your turn, and that can set you up for so many different plays, right? So imagine a common scenario that happens with this deck is I'll have Shadow Scryer, on board, Dimension Door or Form of Wisdom in hand. I get to foresee one, and if it's a card that I know I can use to get a discount, I'll go ahead and get that discount, and that's really nice. Not to mention, it's free chip damage every turn. It can help you stabilize your board if you're behind, and it can help you win the board early so that you can play Runic Familiar without worrying about your opponent's minions trading into it. Dimension Door is another MVP of the deck. Draw a card and reduce its mana cost by 1 if it costs less than your unlocked mana gems. Yeah, that's really good, especially when you're running a deck with a whole bunch of 1 mana spells, right? So, very good card. If you can combo this with Runic Familial, it can get really big, really fast. Same with Monoliths of Storms or basically any of the spells. But, I mean, you're not mad if you hit, like, any of these cards, really. If you discount, like, a Vortimer, you're good. Discounted Demetrios, that's great. Palace 1, great. So yeah, the card is very good. Sometimes you hit another Dimension Door and you get a free draw, and that's amazing. And when paired with Archimea, you replenish a mana. So instead of spending 1 mana to, you can Dimension Door when you have Archimea on board. Archimea replenishes 1 mana. Dimension Door discounts 1. If you hit a 1 mana spell, that 1 mana spell turns into 0. So you can play the 0 mana spell to get 1 mana back. And that's some pretty insane stuff, really. So yeah, this card is good. Make sure to use 2. Form of Power is really good. 2 damage to an enemy creature and 1 damage to your opponent's god. It scales really well with Street Conjurer, and it's a 1 mana spell. What do you say? And then it's a good 1 mana spell, right? So it helps you fulfill 2 win conditions. 1, you get to control board. 2, you get to do damage to your opponent. And the more damage you could do in the shortest amount of time, the more success you can have with this deck. Seeing Stone, foresee 1, draw a card. Simple. Why do we run it? It's a 1 mana spell that lets you draw a card, and you can foresee. So you get to pick whether or not you can draw the card, which is really good in a deck like this. Next up, we have Assistant Alchemist. This is the other card you want to open with. Select a card that costs no more than your total unlocked mana gems, reduces cost by 1. Typically, I will either use this card to discard a Shadow Scryer. It can set you up for Runic Familial plays. You can use this on a Palace 1, turn 1. You just play Bag of Tricks first, just to make sure you get the discount. I like playing this on Vortimer and Demetrios as well. Overall, it's a great card. And it's a 1 mana 2/2. Like, you can, oh man, it's so versatile in that sense. And it can discount so many things. So yeah, this card is a must include. Next up, we have Street Conjurer. This is the 1 mana 1/3 spell boost. Synergizes with Ancient Text and Form of Power. It also serves as a 1/3 minion that you can play on board on turn 1. Also synergizes with Demetrios and Vow of Learning for more damage. Essentially, this will buff your spells to help you control board until you can play your Runic Familiar or your Oni Spellsword or your Vortimer, right? So, very good card. It trades well with a lot of minions on the mana curve too, so or on the that are 1 mana. So, yeah, it's a great card overall. Runic Familiar. This card, yeah, it's a very good card, especially when left unchecked, right? So in this deck, you play this as early as turn 2 if your opponent can deal with it. Oh, okay, so let me talk about the skill behind using this card. So there are going to be some situations where you use Runic Familiar as bait to bait out removal from your opponent. That's perfectly fine, right? Especially if you have another Runic Familiar or another Oni Spellsword waiting in your hand. There are also sometimes where you want to just tempo it out and see if your opponent has answers, especially if you have no board. Sometimes playing a Runic Familiar raw can win a game, right? Because if your opponent can't answer it with either their god or hero power, their god power, then or another removal card, then you're going to go off next turn and you're going to end up with a 2 mana 8/8 or 2 mana 8/7, sorry. Yeah, this card is good. Don't get me started when you get 2 on the board, because when you get 2 on the board, shit hits the fan. Yeah, very good card overall. You run 2 of these for sure. The reason why I like this card over the 5 mana version of this card, it's the 5 mana 4/4 that has the same effect, except it gets 2/1, is that 5 mana is just so slow to establish. And sometimes when you get to that point, it's like game over, right? You've already either lost board or vice versa, or you want to play something like Monolith of Storms that can hit your face more reliably. So yeah, Runic Familiar is great. It's the cheap option. The cheaper option is always good, better, right? So if you ever run into cards with similar effects, always choose the cheaper option and then use the more expensive option if you feel like you need more cards to create consistency. This deck doesn't need more consistency because basically half your deck is draw. So yeah, that's pretty consistent in my opinion. Next up, we have Form of Wisdom. Draw a card. If it's a spell that costs 3 or less, reduce this cost to 0. Oh, hey, look. We have lots of spells that cost 3 or less. We actually only have spells that cost 3 or less. So, yeah, this card is good. If it hits a minion, you're not mad at it because your minions are cheap too. And if they're not cheap, you get the Archimea or the Monolith of Storms, and those are pretty good cards. So, yeah, you're happy with playing this card even if you don't hit the discount. Next up, we have Palace Wand. Yeah, this card is a 1-card draw engine. Combined with the rest of the draw cards in this deck, you're going to be drawing a ton. It's really easy for this card to get up to like 12 durability, 10 durability. Yeah, you can lead off with this card too, like play your Bag of Tricks turn 1, play Palace Wand, and then let your opponent get tempo. Hopefully you have a follow-up with like a Form of Power or Ancient Text. But yeah, establishing this card will tend to let you win the game because it's just such a strong draw engine for sure. Speaking of draw engines, we have Vortimer the Volatile. After you play a spell, give this creature +1 strength at the end of your turn. If this creature has 3 strength or more, set it to 1 strength and draw a card. This card is also a draw engine. I love playing this on turn 1 with Assistant Alchemist. So you Bag of Tricks, Assistant Alchemist, hit the Vortimer, and then from there summon a Vortimer discounted. So you have a 2/2 and a 2/3, and if they don't deal with the 2/3, you get to go off next turn, which is really nice. The cool thing about this card as well is it can attack, unlike Monolith of Storms, right? So you go off, you play all your draw spells, it gets up to like 6 to 8 to 10 attack, and then you attack. Hopefully you attack face, because you should be attacking face if you're going to apply that much damage, and you draw a card right after. Of course it goes back down, but you should still have a decent hand because of this draw effect, which is nice. And if you use this in conjunction with Palace Wand, that's great. You get more draw. So that's amazing. Demetrios Playwright is another option, or is another card that's really a must include actually. You do want to open this if you don't have a Palace or Vortimer. But yeah, add a final draft to your hand at the start of your turn, upgrade a final draft. So this is another card that your opponent has to deal with right away. If they don't, you get to upgrade your final draft. Even if they do deal with the Demetrios right away, you're not mad at it because the final draft becomes a 1-mana spell that deals 1 damage and draws 1 card, which is essentially what all the 1-mana spells in your deck do, right? So yeah, you're not mad at all. It helps proc for the Vortimer, it procs help the Oni, it procs help the Monolith, the Runic, and it pairs well with Street Conjurer. So very good card in my opinion. Not only that, you can also, if they don't deal with it and they choose to leave it alone, you can upgrade your final draft and get more cycle out of it, right? And that's really good. So yeah, this card just helps the deck so much. So Oni Spellsword is going to be your next threat ward. After you play a card, this creature gets +1 strength, and the friendly creature with lowest health gains ward. Yeah, this card is busted. In the PTR or in the core rework, I believe it gets 1/1 now instead of 1 strength, so it's going to be even more busted when you play this deck. Yeah, it's so good. So say your opponent deals with the Runic Familiar. Great, they have to deal with an Oni Spellsword now, and the Oni Spellsword has ward, so they have to waste 2 spells to kill it. Yeah, if you're ahead on tempo with this deck, you pretty much win because as long as you can like layer your threats really well. If you get two Oni spell swords out, that's just crazy. Although I don't think I would want two Oni spell swords, I'd try to layer my threats. But if you can get it out with a runic familiar, for example, like Jesus, you play the Oni spell sword, you play the runic familiar gets ward, and then you play any of your discounted spells. Maybe you play a dimension door as a follow up. And then you get like an ancient text, and then you play the ancient text, and you either get protected to one of your threats, or you kill off something on your opponent's board. It's a really effective card, and especially in this deck, it goes off. So yeah, you're running two for sure. Next up, you have Vow of Learning. So this card is really versatile. I'm only running one because you really want to run very cheap spells in this deck, but it's a versatile card, right? Deals 1 damage, deals 2 damage. You can use it to protect a creature, like your Runic Familiar or your Vortimer or your Oni Spell Sword. You can use it to give it ward as well. If someone pops the Oni Spell Sword's ward, you can re-give it ward. It's just a very versatile card, and it also, the damage parts of it scale well with Street Conjurer, right? Because they're two separate effects. So basically, you get to deal 2 more damage. It goes from 3 damage to 5 damage if you use both damage effects, which is really nice for 3 mana. Next up, we have Archimea Arithmancer. So this is a 5 mana 3/5 with ward. After you cast a spell that costs 3 or less, refresh 1 mana. Yeah, this card can let you pump up your Runic Familiars or your Onis or your Monolith to an insane amount, especially if you hit like Dimension Doors and Form of Wisdoms. Yeah, it can be pretty insane. Like, imagine playing Archimea on turn 5 and then following up with a Monolith of Storms, and then Dimension Door, hitting another Dimension Door, discounting that Dimension Door, so putting you at 2 mana, hitting a Form of Wisdom, playing the Form of Wisdom for 1 mana, so on and so forth. It can get pretty insane, and it could be really crazy. Yeah, it's a good card, and it has ward, so it's pretty hard to remove. 5 health is decent, and I mean, if you've been playing the deck right, you're usually going to be ahead on tempo at this point of the game, so it'll just put more pressure on your opponent to deal with your threats, right? And lastly, we have Monolith of Storms, Order 10. After you play a spell, give 2 strength to this creature. Ability, deal damage to an enemy character equal to this creature's strength. Then set this creature's strength to 0. This is pretty much your finisher. So usually the flow of the game will be your opponent is trying to deal with your Runic Familiar and your Oni Spell Sword, and they expend all of their resources to get rid of them. You play the Monolith of Storms, and your opponent probably doesn't have an answer to it, right? And if they do come up with an answer, it's probably too late. Very good card. I think the most damage I've done with this card in 1 turn was like 15 or 17, something like that. It was an insane number. My opponent was not expecting it, but yeah, it's a good card, and it has order, so your opponent has to use spells to kill it, or like a god power to kill it, or like a combination of those. So yeah, it's pretty good. Does a lot of damage and wins games. In some matchups, though, you don't even need to use it as a finisher. Like against Aggro War, for example, I'll play this card and just use it to clear boards so that I can get like a card advantage, pretty much. It's free advantage every turn if your opponent doesn't have an answer for it, so it's pretty useful in that sense. And that's pretty much it with the card lists. If I had to go over like certain tips, you definitely want to open up Shadow Scryer and Street Conjurer or any of the minions when you mulligan. Use those minions as leverage to clear board, do damage, and help you set up a Runic Familiar or Oni Spellsword play. That's pretty much it. You know, make sure you're utilizing your draws and your foresees, especially because if you can use your foresees correctly from Shadow Scryer or what's the other one, Seeing Stone, you'll be able to get way more mileage out of your spells than most of the time. Yeah. So yeah, keep that in mind. Weaknesses of the deck. It takes a little bit of a learning curve, for sure. You do have to be mindful of your draw and like your resources, because if you burn out too quickly, you can screw yourself over. You have to make sure it's safe to play a Runic Familiar and then go all in. Like I think that's part of the skill with the deck. Like you need to know when to go all in and when to fake that you're going all in by like playing a Runic Familiar and then maybe buffing it 1 or 2 cards, but you have a extra Runic Familiar in hand and you can go way deeper. You're just trying to bait out your opponent's removal. That kind of stuff matters. But yeah, also this deck should be going face majority of the time. Don't only trade if it can set you up for more damage next turn, right? Because yeah, you don't want to waste like a really big Runic Familiar attack. Why can't I pronounce that word? That's crazy. Runic Familiar attack on like a 1 mana 2/2, right? You want to, if your Runic Familiar is like over 5 like strength, you should be going face no matter what. And then the Monolith or the Demetrios or any of the other cards should be able to take you there. In terms of Sanctum priority, you want the damage cards for sure. Definitely damage cards. And then you want spells. You also want threats. Basically anything that helps you ensure that you can get a Runic Familiar off, you'd probably want to play. And then if you need any finishers, if you've already gotten the Runic Familiar off, you want to supplement it with damage. So Runa Power, Runa Strength, Lambasting Wand, those kinds of things are going to be key in the Sanctum. Cool. And I think that's it, pretty much. The deck is really fun. Feel free to check out the videos after this guide. I think there are going to be 2 games after I do this guide, so feel free to watch those. And if you like the video and, you know, you like the channel, please feel free to like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about the deck as well. It's a really fun deck and it's pretty cheap. Well, I mean, cheap. It's cheap-ish. Yeah. You'll have more trouble getting the cheaper spells like Lost in the Depths, Ancient Text, all that stuff. But you're not buying any Demogorgons or anything like that. So it's a really fun deck. Hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Enjoy the games played after, and have a good night / morning / afternoon. Take care, y'all. Bye. Alright, so let's try out this Miracle Magic deck. This is going to be interesting. I like this burning thing. That's cool. Oh, we're going first. That's good. Yeah, I think we want that. Ugh. That's honestly really solid. Maybe. Ugh. That's so solid. What do I want to do here? Just do this. We assistant into Shadow Scryer. Make it look like we're actual, just regular tempo magic. Oh, this is busted. I'm so happy. Yeah, he summons Enduring Shields. Little do they know. Oh. I want to see if I can draw a draw card. That'd be beautiful here. Let's see it. It's only spell sword. That's pretty okay. That should have been discounted, right? Or am I tripping? I guess it doesn't discount. Damn, that would have been so busted. I got greedy. I wonder what he's going to set up with. 3? Oh, Axe Raider, Falconer. Interesting. What you going to attack? Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, sir. Oh. Oh, yeah. I'm just going to summon that and attack first. Get a Palace Wand to set up, which is super nice here. We're going to take that. As long as this guy doesn't swing. Don't swing, please. Okay, he swung. Okay. Oh. Yes. Okay. Every time you play a card, after you play a card, this creature gets 1 strength. Okay. I think we have to sack the Scryer here, which kind of sucks, but this is going to set us up for future turns. So we sack the Scryer. I give protected. Is that the better play? Yeah, that's a better play. We can't do anything here, so we just gotta do this. Because now we set up the draw, which is really nice here. Okay, Archangel Bruiser, that's fine. He plays it raw. No one drop. Sick. Sick. So good. Oh my god. We can't play the Demetrius. I'm not going to play the Demetrius yet. Ah. Okay. That's the end of our journey. Let's see what he summons. Oh. Summon anything. Uh-oh. Oh, Nocti Pillager. Okay. So this is what we can do here. Play the Vow of Learning. Looks like we're dealing 2 damage and we're trading. We're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to deal 2 damage first. We're going to give the familiar here. Go ahead and do this. What do we get? Ancient Text. So we can even set up this way. This forces him to ram his Robin into the Runic Familiar. Archangel Bruiser is out, but he already used one, right? So, oh, 6. Oh, Raynor. Oh, okay, we're good. Okay. We survive, which is so nice. Oh my god, that's a Shadow Scryer. I mean, technically we just trade and set up. I like the Anar. We can draw here, probably not going to be worth. So we're going to set up the Monolith now. Gonna draw, set up the draw. Okay. And we'll trade, because I don't like the Anar. I mean, I guess I could have went face, but Anar is just so much value, right? I want to prevent that. It's a Deuteria. Slayer Hero Power. Okay. I wonder what kind of deck this is. Oh. Oh. Form of Wisdom. What are we at? They're at 1? Damn. It's gonna be so good though, so yeah, I'll play that. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to use the Monolith on this. That should be okay. It's kind of a waste though, right? Yeah. Kind of is. I just like the fact that, or I just like Rune of Strength on this though, you know? But it is kind of a waste. Maybe we can just do that. Get this. Then we could play Vortimer. And we can play the Rune of Strength. And we could just use the Strength. Discharge the bolt. Yeah, that's decent. That's a 0-7, but you get like so much ammo for next turn. Holy crap. I'm gonna see if we can go off. That'd be great if we can go off. Who do you attack, sir? Vortimer would probably be the best, right? Can't really attack the Monolith of Storms, can you? Dude, we can go off next turn. Let's hope we do. Oh my god. Do I even need to Archimea here? I just need to hit 5 spells, right? Technically 4. So let's maximize that opportunity. We'll go Form of Wisdom first. Nope, not it. Wow. What a low roll. Here we go. Okay. Do this. Draw. Oh, Lost in Depths. That's really good. Take away the 5 drops. Right? Oh, beautiful. GG's. Exactly what we needed. And we win. Very good stuff. Not bad. Whew. We're going first, that's nice. Ooh, enemy land of Vortimer. Okay. Monolith is okay. Oh, shit. That's really good. Shadow Scryer? I think Shadow Scryer is good. I had a Vortimer here, so let's see what we can do with that Vortimer. We can tempo out a Runic Familiar, but oh. No, we want to... I don't know, that's a good question. Vortimer's okay. I'll play the Dimension Door now, so we can get something good. Oh, that's an Archimea. Okay, that's fine. Oh, nice. That's pretty good. Dude. Oh my god. Oh. Okay. These are all one cost. This is a... so we'll just make it really awkward. I'm down to make it really awkward. Get a protected to a friendly creature. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Here you go, buddy. Deal with that. Rapture Dance? Just kidding. Don't have a Rapture Dance. Oh, and we have like a ton of... ooh, yeah, that's good. Okay, so we got order 3. That's okay, right? I'm actually okay with that. Okay, I'm gonna use an Infiltrator. Does that matter? Not really, I think. Maybe? I don't know. We're gonna want to attack face though. She's... yeah, okay. Do I care if this thing attacks my face? I might. Oh, that's so good. Okay, we're gonna do this. Confirm. We're gonna do this. Target to 3. Dude. Okay. Okay, what do we do? What's the plan here? We attack tack. Summon the Runic. Sounds really dope. Either... it sounds really good, actually. You're gonna let me have it. Ooh, okay, we get the Palace's Wand. So he's forced to cheat, or Orpheo's Distraction. Okay, he's gonna force you one first. I see. So all these creatures have burn now. This one has burn 4. That's interesting. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, we're just gonna go Lost in the Depths. I'll target a Runic Familiar, why not? Seeing Stone. Form of Power, that's really good. Yeah, we'll draw that. And we got a Levitate here. So see how big we can make this thing. Okay, so this is pretty much all we have left for drawing, right? So we're just going to do that. We're going to do that. No, we want to deal 2 damage. It's over here. Oh my god, that's lethal. That's insane. It feels good when you make a deck and it works. That's amazing.